I chose to review It's a Wonderful Life, a film that was originally released in 1947 and directed by Frank Capra. The film's cast consists of actors and actresses such as James Stewart playing the role of George Bailey, Henry Travers playing the role of Clarence, and Donna Reed playing the role of Mary Hatch. The classic Christmas story begins when a man named George Bailey takes over his father's small building and loan company following his death. Before this, George had big plans. He wanted to travel the world and build big skyscrapers and mile-long bridges. But unfortunately, all that was put to a halt when he felt as if it was necessary to take over his late father's business. And then he gave all of his college money to his younger brother, Harry, who then went on to go to school. And then, as time went by, the war came, and Harry went to go fight in the war. Now, George had to stay home because he got an ear injury while saving Harry's life when they were children. I think this made George pretty upset. He saw it as a chance to prove his masculinity to everybody and finally get out and go see the world. But unfortunately, all that was taken from him, and he was still kept in his small town of Bedford Falls. So then Christmas Eve comes, and George's Uncle Billy, who also works at the building and loan company, mistakenly loses $8,000 that he intended to deposit into the bank. George soon realizes how much trouble they actually are in, and if he doesn't locate the money, he's going to go to jail, pretty much. And so after a long, stressful day at work, he decides to head home and go see his family, who is celebrating Christmas Eve. You know, his wife and his kids are getting the tree already, getting ready to celebrate with the family, and George is having none of it. He does not want to celebrate. He's in a terrible mood. He yells and he screams and he scares his kids. And then he realizes how much damage he's doing, and he decides to just go out and go drinking. And he ends up getting punched in the face for some words that he exchanged earlier that evening in the heat of the moment. And he feels as if he has to go kill himself, as if that's, the only solution. So he drunkenly gets in his car and drives down to a bridge, crashes his car into the tree, and gets out and stumbles over to the bridge, and he's looking down into the water, thinking about it. And then he all of a sudden sees a man down in the water screaming and yelling, drowning, asking for help. And without thinking twice, George jumps in to go save him. And he does. After he saves this man, they're up, on top of the bridge, getting dried off, getting, new clothes on. And the man explains himself as a man named Clarence, who wasn't saved by George, but actually saved George. And George was pretty confused by this at first, but Clarence explains it, as he was sent there as George's guardian angel in order to prevent him from killing himself. And of course, George doesn't really believe it at first, he doesn't think angels are true or any of that. But then he makes a wish that he was never born, and Clarence makes it come true. So George, goes back to walk around town, and everything's different. The town is now called Pottersville instead of Bedford Falls. And he goes home, and his house isn't there. It's in shambles, and his wife's not there. His kids don't exist. His favorite bar isn't there. Everything's different. And he soon comes to realize how many lives he truly did touch and how much of an impact he did have on so many people's lives. And so he finally comes to realize that he does not want to kill himself, no matter how bad his life may seem to get. So he gets put back in this regular world by Clarence, and he's so happy to be alive again, and he runs home to see his wife and his children, and he gets home and he apologizes, and he's just so happy and full of life, even though his life might be pretty sucky at that very moment in time. After he gets home and he apologizes to his wife and his children, and he gets back in the Christmas mood, he's ready to be there and be in the moment with his family, a Christmas miracle happens. And all those people from the town whose lives he touched over the years came back to return the favor. And they together raised the $8,000 that he had lost to begin with. It wasn't an issue anymore. And he began to realize what truly a rich man that he was, even though he had no money. He had all the friends in the world, and that's what really made the difference. I found the ending of this movie to be so interesting because the main villain in the story went by the name Mr. Potter. He was the meanest and richest man in town, and him and George Bailey had a rivalry that went back years. But in the end of the movie, it's not like he finally got his comeuppance. Mr. Potter got what he had coming, got what he deserved, basically. No, there was none of that. It was all, really happy, jolly, and I think that was honestly a good move. I think if there was sort of a bad tone towards the end of the film, it would have taken away from the mood and the morals that the audience received from the film. I think the historical context surrounding the film was also very important, just because, to show what a small town like Bedford Falls was like at that point in time, right after the war, around the war. Everybody knew everybody, and a lot of people were just trying to get out, Young men wanted to go out and see the world, and, a lot of people were just stuck there, couldn't really do much. In the end of the film, when George Bailey's younger brother Harry came home, and he had won a Congressional Medal of Honor in the war, and all this great stuff, and people obviously recognized his greatness, how much he did for everybody, but George Bailey was still, the man of honor that day, simply because he had an impact right in his own backyard that was so significant. It touched almost everybody that was around him, It was hard to find someone who wasn't impacted by George Bailey's presence, and he failed to see that over the years, but in the end, I don't think he was ever going to fail to see that ever again.